In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to take the Parchment model that we created in one of the earlier videos and set it up to create efficient toolpaths so that we're not wasting too much time by machining flat areas using 3D finish strategies. To do that, we're going to create vector boundaries that limit the area that the 3D machining cuts, limit the area where we can pocket machine to clear away the main flat surface of the design, and we'll also show you how to add the decoration that you can see here as well, and ultimately cut this out. To begin, let's open a copy of Aspire. Let's start this example by clicking Open an existing file. I'm going to open the file called Old Paper Finished we created in the previous tutorial. Go up to View, Tile Windows Vertical. We can see what we have here. There's the grayscale, there is our 3D part. What we're going to do is import some vectors that will be the decoration that we're going to machine into the flat part of our parchment. I'm going to come up to Import Vectors from a file. Within the Parchment project folder, you'll find a set of vectors called treasuremapdesign.eps. I'm going to hit Open, and you can see they're just a simple set of vectors. Some of these were just drawn in Aspire, and a couple of them are modifications of some of the vectorart.com models, such as the swords and the boat. And what we're going to do is create toolpaths for our parchment. But what we don't want to do really is 3D machine all of the flat area, because essentially we should be able to do that just with a 2D cut if we create the right kind of boundary. To help us manage the toolpaths, we're going to create a couple more vectors. One is going to be the outline of the whole part, which we can do by selecting the component, coming to the Modeling tab and clicking on the icon to create vector boundary from selected components. If we just deselect that now, click on the edge, we can see that vector. And the other is going to be a vector that represents an offset of that takes into account the folds of paper so that we can define very roughly the flat area of the part. That means we can minimize the area where we're going to create the 3D toolpath, use a flat end mill to create the toolpath for the main level part of the design, and then we'll come in and just engrave these details into that surface. So we're going to come back to the Drawing tab. With this vector that we've got selected here, I'm going to choose the Offset Selected Vectors. I'm going to offset inwards. I'm going to come inwards by 0.3, hit Offset, close, and if we select that and click on N, then we see there's a lot of nodes in that because it was an offset vector, so it wouldn't be very easy to edit. So I'm going to hit N again, come down to Fit Curves to Selected Vectors. We're going to choose the option for Bezier curves because they're easier to edit. Going to put in quite a loose tolerance of 0.05 of an inch. I'm going to choose the option to replace selected vectors and hit Curve Fit and close. If we select on this now and go into node editing, we can see that we've got a much easier to edit vector. What I'm actually going to do now is come into here, I'm going to insert a point there, I'm going to drag this out, I'm basically just going to loosely edit these vectors either by deleting or smoothing them in order so that they roughly follow this edge that we've got here. Go I to insert a point there, we'll drag this one out. Then come down the bottom here and do the same thing, just drag this one out there. Delete a couple of these points, and I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. This stage I'm going to go ahead and save this. Go File, Save As, and we'll call it Old Paper Mac for machine, and hit Save, and that will be in the Parchment project folder. Now if we hit F12 and come across to the toolpath manager, we can start to create our toolpaths. So the first thing we're going to do is set up our material. Just click on the material setup icon. I'm going to put in a value of 0.75, a gap above the model of 0.03, take the rest of the defaults. Next I'm going to select the outer boundary only, and I'm going to choose Create 3D Roughing Toolpath. I'm going to select 0.25 inch end mill, hit Edit. I'm going to change the pass depth to 0.25 in this case and hit OK. Boundary vector offset 0.18 and we'll hit Calculate. And there we can go ahead, and we see we've got a slightly odd preview color there, so I'm just going to change that to cherry and we'll preview that toolpath so we can see how that's going to look. Next we're going to come in and we're going to clear out the middle area and pocket that all the way down. So now I'm going to select this vector here, hit close on the preview. I'm going to come to Create Pocket Toolpath. What I want to do is pocket to this surface, and you can see if I run the cursor over, in the bottom right hand part of the window is displaying the X, Y and Z value right around this area here. So that is at negative 0.4232. So I'm going to put in a start depth of 0.25, but I want a cut depth which is just remind myself of the value, 0.4232 total. So what I can do to calculate that is say 0.4232 minus 0.25 equals, and that'll give me the difference. So I want this value plus this value. Tool I'm going to use 0.25 inch end mill, and we'll go ahead and do a raster and hit Calculate. And there we can see that pocketing out the main inner part of the flat surface. Now we need to create a toolpath which is going to machine the 3D. So I'm going to select the outer vector, select the inner vector, or hit close on here, go to Create 3D Finishing. In this case I'm going to select a 0.25 inch ball nose, hit Apply and OK, and we're going to raster machine this. Boundary vector offset, we'll just put in 0.13 and hit Calculate. And remember, with these two vectors selected, that should just create a toolpath which overlaps the edge and overlaps enough of our flat area in order to finish the part off. So again, if we preview that toolpath, we can take a look. We can make sure we've got quality of finish that we're looking for and we're happy with that. If I can see there in the 3D view that there is an area up the top here where we've maybe cleared away a little too much into the 3D when we were doing the machining of the flat area. I could either decide to leave that as is, or what we may want to do is come into here and change the vector boundary and just drag that in a little more to try and avoid that area. Maybe drag this in here, drag this in here, and then we could recalculate each of those. So we could take the pocket and recalculate that. We could take the 3D finish, just hit calculate on that. It'll pick up the same vectors that we had selected before. Then we could reset the preview, preview the roughing, preview the pocket, and preview the finish. And now we've eliminated the problem that we had up here before by just editing that boundary and recreating it. Let's go up to View, Tiler Windows Vertical again. Next we want to go ahead and machine the detail that we've got into our part. So I'm going to select carefully all the vectors on the interior of the design. We'll just close the preview. I'm going to come up to Create Profile Toolpath. I'm going to say Create Profile On. The start depth, I need to be the flat area here, which is negative 0.4232. So we're going to put in 0.4232. This is a depth, so it's assumed to be a negative value. And the cut depth, I'm just going to put in 0.05, and I'm going to select from the V-bits the 60-degree tool so that we can just etch that information into the surface of the part here. So machine vectors on, start depth set to the surface of the flat area there, cut depth 0.05, so hit calculate, let's preview that. We can see what that's going to give us. If we want it a bit deeper, we could double click, change the cut depth, say 0.08, recalculate, preview that again, sharpen that detail up a little bit. If we're happy with the way that looks, now we're just ready to take the outline and cut the part out. So we can click on that, create profile toolpath, start depth 0, cut depth 0.75, going to select 0.25 inch end mill, going to cut on the outside of the part, hit calculate, hit preview, delete waste material, can maximize that, and there we can see what our finished part is going to look like. Now I can see the detail toolpath looks a little grainy in the simulation, which makes me think that maybe we have the simulation setting, the preview setting set to low quality. If we want to check that, we can go up to toolpath, preview simulation quality. I can see it set to standard. I can change that to best. It does mean I'm going to need to re-preview the toolpaths. In order to speed this up a bit, I can uncheck animate preview, and now what we could do is just select the option to preview all toolpaths. There's the rough, there's the pocket, there's the 3D finish, there is our V-carve and the cutout. If we delete waste material now, we can see that that's a lot sharper interpretation of what our V-bit toolpath is going to look like. And we can decide then perhaps more accurately now what kind of a depth setting we want to use on that. If we're happy with the toolpaths, we would go ahead at this stage and we would post-process them for our machine and we could run them. So we'll come up to File, Save As. We'll save this as Old Paper Mac TP to show that it has toolpaths in it. Hit Save so that if you wanted to, you could open this up and take a look at it. And that concludes this particular example where we've showed you how to take the Parchment model we created in an earlier video and to machine it in a reasonably efficient way by creating boundaries to limit the area where we're 3D machining and create an area where we can 2D machine, in addition to being able to take the detail that we've got in here and profile that using a V-bit into the surface of the part.